So it's great to be joined today by Steve Bendelack, a BAFTA winning film and TV director who has been at the helm of a wealth of iconic British comedies, including Spitting Image, Little Britain, The Mighty Boosh, Friday Night Dinner, The League of Gentlemen, never mind the Buzzcocks, and of course, the entire series, the second series of the Royle Family, perhaps the best series of the show, but we'll get to that in a second. But Steve, thank you so much for coming on the Royal Ramble.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Tom. I mean, as I said, I think when we just briefly chatted, I think you do a great job of it, a great
Mm.
job of explaining the show, and I really recognise the show that we made in your dissection
Thank you for saying
of
that.
the work. Yeah.
I appreciate that. And just to start off with, then, I mean, you've been part of so much classic TV, but
Mm.
what was classic to you growing up? What were you really into?
Oh, I mean, listen. For me, we were quoting. If the Monty Python was on, we'd be doing Monty Python in the playground, and we'd be doing it over and over again,
Yeah.
and it would be non-stop, and it went on for years. It would be. Um, I mean, the really, really, that was probably the most important show of my childhood.
Mm.
And but there were many other things. I mean, there was other shows. I mean, we were a bit older, but I mean, when we got older, of course, I mean, we loved Ronnie Barker. I mean, I
Mm.
really loved the two Ronnies because they had that, but they're all sort of part of the same generation in a way.
Right.
And it's amazing when you, of course, you find out now once you work on shows how tight the community is, and they all work on each other's stuff.
Hmm.
Like for example, Dick Emery worked a lot with Monty Python, and so did David Jason, of course. And I mean,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, what other shows that really, really, really blew my mind? Well, I think Porridge was a massive show for me.
Yes, of course.
You know, the
Hmm.
other one was Whatever Happens to the Likely Lads. I mean, I was
Mm.
obsessed, absolutely obsessed
Yeah,
with that show.
love that.
It just, and watching it's still very good to watch now. As a sort of as a slice of what Britain was absolutely like at that point.
Yeah.
It's just so accurate,
Mm. Mm.
and I think that the accuracy of those shows, when what Caroline and Craig created, I think is on the par with, say, the Likely Lads.
Yeah.
It carries on that great sort of neo-realist comedy tradition
Hmm.
that we
Hmm.
have. Like
Yeah.
as a kid, I mean, like a film that I saw, the films that really blew my mind as a child was Kess
Oh
and
my God, of course.
Billy Liar. And
And
so
Tom Courtney was in the Royal Family eventually.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
because the loneliness of the long distance. I mean, Tom Courtney was an absolute idol of mine,
Mm. Mm.
and
Yeah.
I suppose that's roughly the sort of basically foundation stones of. I mean, there's many other things,
Yeah.
but they're the ones that immediately come to mind.
And it was graduating in graphics, right, from the Cambridge School of Arts that
Yeah, I mean,
led to Spitting Image and the sort of journey.
it was really it was a design art and design course for illustration. Really, I mean,
Mm.
Cambridge School of Art was about drawing, and there was a lot less design. I loosely call it design. Although, I mean, we did do. I mean, I did a lot of running jobs. In between. I had like five different jobs. I was always doing jobs to make. To do something. I used to clean the art school,
Ah.
and but sometimes we'd go. I go on our student pass. We'd go down to London. We'd get a job running for doing some layout in a design group, or running for photographers, or there'd be all
Hmm.
kinds of jobs like that that one did. And I suppose in a way I still think of myself more of a drawer, really. I mean,
Hmm.
I think funny enough, at art school, I was very interested in political satire
Right.
and satirical type.
Is that
You
like
know,
your James Gilray and stuff like that? Or
definitely
yeah,
Gilray, Ronanson, Hogarth,
yeah, yeah.
and then Hartfield, the kind of collages of the sort of early 20th century,
Mm.
and subsequently the satirical artists that of the 20th century, and of course there's a lot of early 20th century's political satire that really intrigued me. I mean, there was a lot of magazines. I mean, for example, in Russia there were 50 weekly
Wow.
satire magazines. And there was something called the Butter Dish that I discovered. It was Lassier Aubert, and it turns out that my tutor's great friend Roger Law,
Hmm.
he said, "Well, you're going to meet him because he's got a collection of this stuff." And they were Roger and his John's other friend, John Holden, my tutor,
Mm.
Peter Fluck and Roger Law were at art school at the same art school as me, and they had a chapel where they did these covers for things like Rolling Stone and Stern magazine
Right, right.
and the Sunday Times, and this is where they created these front cover tableaus of
Yes.
the great and the good.
Hmm.
And they were beginning to do the nascent beginnings of a show, and they needed someone to um to come and basically bring their Chelsea buns with them every morning, take the trash out, sweep the floor, and oh, you can draw a bit, right? Well, we started to work on what then became the pilot of Spitting Image in the chapel in Cambridge.
Mm, mm.
With John Lloyd, who would come and visit us, who was, as you know, a great producer of Not and Icon News,
Yeah.
and so when I left art school, I became their young assistant, really, in the beginning. So I was really a puppet maker then.
But you would go on to direct 20 episodes. Like you would go on to be a huge part of the show quite quickly.
Yeah, I worked on every episode that they ever made. I mean, I was
Mm.
there 11 years. I was there for 11 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I went pretty much from runner slash look. I mean, Spitting Image was like an art school. We were
Yeah.
all people that could draw or paint or build or sculpt. You had to be
Hmm.
builders and sculptors,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
and but also already by then, I mean, at art school, I was really spending a lot of time with cameras,
Mm.
with stills cameras, with Bolexes and Naga
Yeah.
recorders because they
Yeah.
were there. And there was a film course that no one attended apart from me and my mate Marcel. We had two teachers, and we had the entire Cambridge University faculty library at our disposal. So
Unbelievable.
we used to watch 16 you know,
Mm.
copies of, your Himbo and,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
Seven Samurai.
Oh,
It'd be
wow.
Japanese cinema,
God.
Italian cinema, everything really. And of course, we wanted to making films. And I sort of started really, I mean, I was obsessed with going to the cinema
Yeah.
most of the time.
Mm.
And so I don't know, it just feels like, I mean, I think a film that changed my life as a child was Doctor Strangelove.
Oh, yeah.
And you watch, and I watch every, and I often make a point now of watching it every year to see how relevant it is, and because he was a great stills photographer,
Mm.
so I learned about him and at art school and thought, he couldn't go to university because there's so many people coming back from the war. They all got GI um, entrances, and he was 16, and he took some pictures on the street of New York and got himself a job at the New York Post,
Yeah.
and taken on by Ouija and Ouija the famous. You know about Ouija, right?
I don't know. You're
Uh,
talking about Cubic right now. Who's Ouija? I don't know Ouija.
Ouija was a very famous still photographer that had developed a van around New York. He had radios. He'd pick up the police reports,
Oh,
and then he'd take
wow.
his van, go and
Yeah.
shoot the murder, develop the pictures, and get them back onto the press in hours. So he was
My
an
God.
early sort of And so
Fascinating.
so in Doctor Strangelove, I mentioned Ouija because Ouija was influenced the lighting of the war rooms in Doctor Strangelove,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
so there's sort of those sort of influences are all sort of tied up for me, really.
And
And
can you just sort of get across how big Spitting Image actually was? Because it was
yeah,
15 million people were watching it at its peak. I mean, I
it
know
was
TV was different back then, but still,
it
like,
it was a massive show, but they
yeah.
spent massive. Also, I think that it's very interesting that what fascinated me observing the actual the way that the show manages to survive, because when it came on, it was a total disaster,
Mm,
and it had the most incredible sort of hype of any show really
right,
at the time.
right, right.
And one of Roger's, Roger was like, he knew everybody in the print media,
Yeah.
and they were fantastic self-publicists,
Mm,
before
mm.
this is before anything like the internet.
Yes,
So
yeah.
Spitting Image had more coverage before it came on the air than just about any show before or since. And also it cost a fortune to make it.
Mm,
Literally Central Television built an entire studio from scratch
jeez.
to
Yeah.
make the actual puppets.
Hmm.
Right. So then what happened was then there was these huge strikes. It was the miners' strike. And then there was something called the ACT, the TV units and the printers, they're all striking.
Mm,
And so the show comes on, and it was just like decidedly lukewarm reviews. But because of the blackouts, the show couldn't get on the air week by week in the first season. There was a
right.
couple of weeks between each show, which
Yeah.
gave time for the show to get its act together
Hmm.
and start making it work. And like by the skin of its teeth, it sort of towards the end of the first season of 13 episodes, it started to work and it became a massive hit in the second season.
Right,
And then it
right.
became the show that you're talking about, but it was definitely not a massive success to start with, even though it cost hundreds of thousands of pounds per half hour in the mid 80s. Like,
Do you remember the story of Ronald Reagan calling to have it cancelled on NBC? He didn't want it shown.
yeah, well, he didn't want it shown. That was an American special.
Yes, right.
Yeah, that was an American
Okay.
special, and yeah, and funny enough, when they revived the show, the same thing happened with Trump. They
Yes,
paid
yeah.
they paid for the whole show, and apparently they Trump says he wasn't gonna. They got cold feet and they backed out of
Yeah,
doing it.
yeah.
And they had to pay them for the entire 20 episodes that they did, or sorry, 14 episodes
Mm.
that they did. Yeah, no, that's true, and I mean, it's funny because in a way I would argue very strongly that the best satire we've seen in the last, say, 15 years is definitely come out of America.
Mm.
In spades, when you think of, say, just off the top of my head, King of the Hill,
Right.
anything
Yeah.
to do with South Park,
Hmm.
and of course Larry Sanders.
Yes, right, right,
I
right.
mean, those three gigantic shows pick apart and surgically dissect the nature of power in America, and consistently, and this, of course, ultimately the granddaddy of them all is The Simpsons.
Indeed,
I
indeed.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, and so so they've certainly they've certainly have a strong existing market for that material, which does not exist here
Mm, mm.
anymore. I don't know. So anybody that says that Americans don't know anything about satire, I always go, yeah, I don't think that's actually true.
Yeah.
There's no empirically, it's completely incorrect. It's like, um, but as you say, the show here just in the second season just exploded, and it became, and ITV loved it. They got, in those days, of course, to be a successful show, it wasn't just, to be a successful show, getting 5 million viewers was a failure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Getting 5 million viewers, getting sort of 7 million viewers, yeah, you've done okay.
Mm.
You've done okay. 10 million viewers, yeah, yeah. I mean, we're okay with 10, just about. and of course they would kill for 2.5 million these days.
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah. So that is the landscape of it. And of course there was only 4 channels, and so but it was a brilliant. Whoever decided it was 10 o'clock on a Sunday night got that particular
Yes.
time absolutely bang on correct for
Hmm.
that show.
Hmm. Hmm.
It just felt, and of course it had, because it cost so much money, it had like 6 minutes of ads before it came on.
Well, speaking of ads, though, you directed the Spitting Image Cadbury's ad, right? The How Do You Eat Yours? I think there was two of them, weren't there?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of commercials. Yeah, I mean,
Mm.
and that there were just a few. I mean, in fact, they're probably my least favorite commercials I've ever made.
Right.
But I mean, I met. Listen, while we were doing Spitting Image, we were a big operation
Mm.
of people that we didn't really want to split up in the down periods and not doing the show.
Yeah.
So we tried to keep, the workshop and people around as much as possible.
Hmm.
And so we would do things. We would do ads all over the world. I mean, we would make things for people. We would do all sorts of creatures and animatronics, and we'd build loads of different types of things just to keep everybody together. And
Hmm.
I and we'd make some really, truly terrible ads, but for suitcases of cash. So
What?
so I mean, for example, I mean, I remember, I mean, my child. No one's ever seen. No one. So people say mention the Cadbury's eggs ads because they're often
Mm.
mentioned in the bio. Whoever wrote the bio, I have no idea.
Yeah,
But
that's where
I
I
mean,
discovered you did them. Yeah.
yeah, I know, and I think it's really funny. But yes, of course, don't worry. But like, I mean, I did some Chicken Tonight ads once. I mean,
Oh yeah, yeah.
but for America, which were.
Okay.
But I mean, I could go on. I mean, there are many puppet ads that I've made
Yeah.
along the way.
Well,
Um,
yes. Sorry, go on.
no, I was going to say that. But I tell you what, I mean, it was an amazing. What I would say about Spitting Image was, to me, it taught me so much technique, so much, because there was, it had to be on the air every week. The turnaround for a show like that, the sort of 24-hour nature of its rolling demands on material writing, actual execution,
Yeah.
and building, and also in terms of the highly complex post production, a lot of very very high end, multi-layered digital blue screen and green screening stuff that we were doing all the time. And turning it around sort of week in week out. Some weeks if we were working on other specials, not just the series for the UK transmissions, we could go 28 weeks with flat out production, back
Mm.
to back,
Mm.
you know
Mm.
and so um as an incredible education, and as someone who drew for a living, really,
Yeah.
it was sort of a perfect way to become a director.
Now, I just want to stay on puppets for one moment because we were chatting off air and you were talking about how you appreciate the fact that I dug into a lot of the cultural references and a lot of
Yeah,
and that's something that I'm obsessed with, Steve. I must say, whenever I
yeah.
stumble upon a TV show, I'm like, I've never heard of this. What is
Yes.
this? And I realize there's a fan base for it. The Winjin Pom. Now, I this show, I there's no they're on YouTube. All the episodes are on YouTube.
Are
But I
they
don't think
really?
anyone's ever covered. Yeah, they are actually. They are, and
Yeah,
there's lots of comments, people saying they love this show. I don't really
yeah.
know how to explain this show. I believe it was on Saturday early evenings, but it's
It was
kind of like
a children's
yeah.
show.
I mean,
Yeah.
what's the concept? Can you just let our listeners know the concept of this show?
Well, the show was really. I mean, it's a great question to ask what the context was. I think what it came from was that Roger, as a great fan of illustration, and
Mm.
there was these characters that he liked from Australian illustration that were, I've forgotten the book's name actually, but these aren't from there. But
Yeah.
uh, I think initially he was inspired by sort of this ensemble. Sort of, we wanted something, I suppose, to be, or Roger did, that was very different in a way from Spitting Image. So it's much more
Yes.
about. It was just a very innocent, charming. I don't know whether it was very successful. It wasn't really. It wasn't successful at all. A bunch of animal adventurers
Yes.
going on there,
Australian they are. Yeah.
and they're Australian, of course,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're sort of, and they go on a picaresque series of adventures, and along the way they encounter, these baddies called the Crows,
Yes.
and who are, let's face it, rather sort of like not very subtly modeled on certain gangsters
No.
from
No.
England, and
Yes. Yes. Ronnie and Reggie
but
Crow. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, come on, and and Richard, who had written The Borrowers, actually,
Mm.
which was a big success. He wrote the shows, and so we gave it a go. I don't think we pulled it off desperately well, but I haven't seen the show since, so
Well,
maybe I should have a look.
I think you should. I really think
Yeah,
myself and my partner skipped through it yesterday, a few
yeah,
episodes, and it is a fever dream. It is a wild show. I mean, here's the description on IMDb. An evil
yeah.
mafioso like vulture wants to steal a talking vehicle from a traveling group of Australian
Yeah,
native animals. So it's,
yeah.
it's out there, but I just couldn't believe it when I stumbled upon it. It's your first credit, really, other than Spitting Image. So it's just
I
interesting.
know, but I mean, I suppose in a way, I didn't really consider it my first credit because
Yeah.
I sort of I sort of did it because I was there
Mm,
and I suppose I'm not sure I particularly wanted, if I confess, wanted to make it
right, right.
at the time, but um, it was something that we we certainly we what do I think about it? I must look at it. I think
Mm.
it had some lovely puppets in it.
Yeah, no, it's visually astonishing. It's really
Yeah,
impressive. Yeah.
it has and it has some very interesting sort of stylizations. I just think we just didn't quite get. I'm not sure whether the writing was quite there for it.
Mm, mm, mm.
But I mean, it became what became very successful out of the Winjin Pom wasn't the Winjin Pom car, which was what the Winjin Pom was,
Yeah.
but it was actually the Crows were hugely popular in France.
Right.
So
Okay.
the Crows became like when you do interstitials for things like children's shows, and
Yes,
they
of
have
course.
that kind of thing. The
Mhm.
Crows became Canal Plus's for quite a long time. Canal
Oh.
Plus's go-to characters to, host as the sort of pivot for presenting other shows of their in terms of their children's output. Say,
How interesting. How
yeah,
interesting. And
and
look,
so yeah, and then at one point, a few years later, Roger came up to me and says, "You haven't," he said, when we did the Crows, you haven't seen any other Crows called Roger and Reggie Crow, have you?" I said, "No." Why? And apparently there was a court case that
oh,
claiming that the Ronnie and Reggie Crow characters were completely stolen from someone else.
oh God. Okay.
And apparently it went to the High Court and all sorts. And
Damn.
you go, well, no, I mean, it's not exactly the most original gangsters.
No, it's kind of on a plate. Yeah. It's kind of
But I
there.
mean,
But,
but
yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I said, no, I've never heard of them, right?
I
And then
mean,
we did Peter and the Wolf, of course. Did you ever see that?
I saw it. It's missing from my Steve Bendelack,
Yeah,
visual idea. Yeah, I must say.
yeah, that was
But
quite interesting. Um, but and I think that had Roy Hudd in it actually, which
mm,
is he played Prokofiev, and yeah, that was pretty successful
I mean,
of those puppet things. Yeah,
yes, yes, and you were part of so much, and like all the Lee and Herring stuff, and all
Yes, that's
the
right. Yeah.
all this sort of stuff. But just before we get on,
And Rob Newman and David Baddiel. We did a lot with
exactly.
a lot with that as well. And yeah, so I've done a lot of Armando Iannucci and
Well,
Peter
yeah,
Bainham and
I had
Dave
never
Schneider.
really heard of the Saturday Night Armistice before this
No,
episode, but that was I don't think that's really like lived on with the Iannucci kind of lineage. But
no, it
that
hasn't.
was a
And
big show, was it?
and there's some really really brilliant stuff in it.
Yeah, and
You know,
lots of brilliant people early on. Like, yeah.
oh my God, yeah. I mean,
Mm.
like it was one of those things because at one point when on that score, I mean, I was gonna sort of I was there was talk of me being involved in the day to day, when
Right.
that was,
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
but we were in the midst of prepping the final series of Spitting Image, so
Mm.
and we'd already tried to persuade Armando when he was doing the radio version of what became the day to day
Yeah.
with that had Lee and Herring and everybody and Steve and Patrick Marber and everyone
Yeah.
all doing that show, and then um anyway, I helped them get the graphics together and get the graphics people um, to start developing ideas for the day to day. But and by then we were already doing the other show, so the final series of Spitting Image, and I was never not going to do that. So
No, of course. Of course.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's 12 years of my life, and but you know. So that was and then I got what became Friday Night Armistice, the first iteration of the Armistice shows. I think we did 2 seasons of that, did we? Or 2 seasons of Friday Night Armistice, and then 1 season of Saturday Night Armistice.
That's right. Yeah. It
Yeah,
changed, didn't it?
something like that. It just
Yeah.
moved to another day. But I mean, it was great fun working with that team.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
did some really interesting things. We did some.
Yeah. You did the election special as well, like an
We
alternative
did that as
coverage.
well. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was really really good actually. Um, and that was a mammoth undertaking.
Yeah.
And so yeah, there's tons of work. I often forget how much work there is.
There's so
There's
much that I couldn't believe it, Steve, going through. I was like, he did this and that. And then on
yeah,
top of all this, you did the
yeah.
first 3 series of Nevermind the Buzzcocks. You
That's
directed all of
true.
them.
That's
Like,
true.
like that
Yeah,
is unbelievable on top of everything else. Like, and
yeah.
I was looking through the guests. You had Billy Bragg on there, Glenn
Oh no, it was
Tilbrook.
awesomely good
Like,
fun.
yeah.
And also at that time, I just left Spitting Image and just had, and Nicola was pregnant at the time, and we were
Mm,
just, and you know what? I hadn't actually done a panel comedy game.
right.
And I thought, well, and then they offered me the talkback offered me the season, and I thought, well, I don't know how to do one, but I mean, I'll it's I've obviously done a lot of multi-camera with Spitting Image, so um, yeah, and it was enormous. It was actually really good fun, and because music is a massive thing for me. I mean, that's
Yeah.
one of my well,
Same. Yeah.
for all of it. It's for all of us, but
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
quite frankly, and. And I think that one of the greatest things about Nevermind the Buzzcocks is, when I was a kid, someone put it once on the NME when the NME was New Musical Express was a great magazine.
Mm,
Said there was a time when your grandma wanted to know what number one was.
mm.
It was that important.
Yeah.
It was that important to the entire country.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
not only your grandma, your great grandma, the Queen, and whoever's sweeping the roads.
Hmm.
I mean, everybody. What mattered? That mattered to us in a
Yes. Yeah.
massive,
Yeah.
great,
Yeah.
big way. And
Hmm.
so I think that so never mind the Buzzcocks came slightly after that was actually a thing. It still was a thing, but it could sort of draw on this incredible pop legacy that many generations of UK people have. So you can
Hmm.
be 80, you can be 85 and watch that show, and you can be 8.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know,
Indeed. Indeed.
and so yeah, no, it never got old for me, and I remember doing that. I remember doing the camera script, thinking, "Oh, it's going to work." And of course, once you've done it, I didn't realize, but once you've done a camera script for one show, you barely change it for the next one.
Mm,
because you
mm.
can't, because then there's three people behind a desk, three people behind a desk, and there's a host, and there's
Mm.
only so much you can do, and I thought that was quite amusing.
So, around obviously in the background as you're doing all this amazing stuff, we have Caroline, with Mrs. Merton, we have
Yeah,
Henry Normal, we have Craig Cash. Like, were you familiar with their work? Were you an admirer of their work
of
as you
course
were
I
doing
was.
your own?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd seen Caroline on doing Sister Mary Immaculate
Oh,
live.
you saw that. Wow.
Yeah, I
Okay.
saw that,
Mm,
and of course, you know, the Fast show. I mean, that was a pretty big deal,
so good. Yeah.
and and actually, I'd seen the show that I'd actually seen the Granada show with John Thompson, Steve Coogan, and Caroline in
Oh, the
the regional
pilot.
show. Yeah, the regional sketch show.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I've not heard of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
which involved it's like a really interesting show.
Mm.
Sort of like in those days. I mean, for example, Eddie Braben was a huge Northern comic that wrote everything for Morecambe Wise.
Right.
I mean,
Right. Right.
all
Right.
that a lot of that material was written by them.
Mm, mm.
So they did that show. So I knew that. And of course, um, that particular sort of group, I knew all about. I knew John very well, and that sort of caucus of artists like Steve and Caroline. They're all sort of, it's a small world, isn't it?
Mm, mm.
In reality. So, and then I was making a show that didn't didn't really work out with Rob Grant, who did Red Dwarf,
Right.
and it
Yeah.
was a show about the millennium involving Phil Jupiter as a Saxon,
Oh yeah,
right?
no, I've seen that on your IMDb. Yeah, the reviews weren't too
And that's where
complimentary. Yeah.
that's where I had Sheridan Smith. That's where I, as a young
Oh,
17-year-old girl, and I
wow.
thought, and that's how we. Then when we wanted someone to be, the boyfriend, the girlfriend to be Emma.
Emma. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that was
Well, I said,
you.
why not
Wow.
get Sheridan in?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that what happened was I was working at Granada, and then Caroline and Craig were writing literally in the next room the series that I subsequently were working on.
Mm.
They'd already done the Royal Family. The Royal Family was a massive success. The first one was, well, I mean, it wasn't the massive success that it became, but
Yeah.
it was not. It was very highly regarded. The
Yeah.
first season,
I
the
wanted I wanted
first,
I wanted to ask you about that. I was curious, like, yeah, because it seems like in retrospect, I was too young myself, but it
yeah.
seems like it was like a big deal. It wasn't like a
Oh
sleeper thing. It wasn't like
no, no, no!
no.
It definitely wasn't a sleeper thing. It was like because she'd already done Mrs. Merton.
Yeah.
She's a big star by then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, and subsequently talking to Caroline, I mean, she did Mrs. Merton with the specific strategy of being a success. And she said this.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
if she ever has said this, but she told me this many, many moons ago that
Mm.
the reason she did Mrs. Merton was to make the Royal Family,
Right. Yeah.
to become, a star big enough in her own right to go, this is what I want to do next. And they'll go, yes, please.
Yes. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and so, and of course, I mean, anyway, so Andy Harris, who was running Granada at the time, he called me in and says, we were interested in doing Caroline and Craig want to meet you for a chat about the series of because Mark Mylod,
Hmm.
great director
Oh
who
yeah.
did the first season of Royal Family, couldn't do it. He's off to America to make Entourage, I think, or
Oh right.
something.
And obviously
Uh,
he's done lots of Succession since he's like the major Succession director.
he's the main man, of course,
Unbelievable.
and so would you come in and I sat down and watched an episode with Caroline and Craig one lunch hour,
Mm.
and they were seeing various directors that day, and it was great, to sit down and just watch. I really enjoyed meeting them as well, talking to them.
I was gonna say, what were
Um,
they like? Yeah.
they
How
were
were they?
just they were just great. I mean, they were
Yeah.
just like I don't know. I just felt instantly connected to them. I mean, I just felt
Yeah.
really like, but I already had immense respect for them. I mean, I'd seen the show and think this is so good.
Mm,
I
mm.
mean, the cast, everything about it. I mean, it's just, and so if I'm honest, I don't feel that. I mean, I don't know why I'm talking about it. You should be asking Mark. Because I mean, I'm coming in. That's the first. So I'm coming into this successful show. I go,
Yes.
well, actually, I really want to. I really want to. I really like this show, and I could see the influences. In my photography life and artistic life, I'm looking at that thinking, well, that looks like Paul Watson from the 1970s.
Right,
That
right,
looks
right,
like,
right.
they've
Yeah,
ever
yeah, yeah.
seen that. You've seen that Paul Watson type style in
Hmm.
those
Yeah,
documentary style, and
yeah,
it's that to a T, really.
yeah.
And the fact that they did it in standard 16 when by then standard 16 was a pretty arcane format. It should have
Hmm.
been super 16. And I thought, well, that's you can only do that if you're a big. I mean, if I'd have said to the networks, I really want to do it in standard 16, they would have said, fuck off. We're doing it.
Right, right, right.
They were, but she insisted, and I mean, I sometimes when I look at the transfers on the Apple, the Panascan version of it, I think, oh, that's not actually how it looks.
Yeah.
But that's another story. But for me, coming into a show is I better not fuck it up then, because
Mm,
it's really rather good.
mm.
And but I really admired it. And to me, my favorite form of observational photography is look. I mean, I grew up admiring directors like Hal Ashby
Yes, of
and
course. Yep.
and Robert Altman,
Oh
and
my, I love Robert Altman. Mm.
and so it's like you can see that I would have thought that Paul Watson is sort of that generation as well.
Yeah,
There is
yeah, yeah.
that if that makes any sense. I hope this isn't boring. Is this boring?
This is fascinating, Steve. Please continue.
No, so I
Please,
mean,
this is amazing.
I do tend to sort of waffle on. I do
I
apologize.
I am all ears. Please continue.
No, because what fascinates me about those directors is that they started pioneering a more stripped down kind of naturalistic performance style.
Mm.
The certainly Altman
Oh yeah,
and
the
then
McCabe
sort of,
and Mrs. Miller and the Nashville and the
yeah, and
yeah, yeah.
Mash, and when they did Mash,
Mash. Oh my God, love that.
and then with Hal Ashby, you got the
Harold
last
and
detail,
Maude and
the
yeah.
Howard and Moore, the last
Mm.
detail.
Yep,
I
yep,
mean,
yep,
these
yep.
things are just incredible pieces of work.
Yeah, yeah,
Five
yeah.
easy pieces. So this was very
Oh,
much, so that was Bob Ralston. So that whole caucus of filmmakers, I think, changed everything. And so, and that I was really lapping that stuff up.
mm.
That to me, it looked like, say, Magnum street photography, photojournalism
Yeah.
taken into the film world and turned into a sort of stripped down storytelling, except they had big stars to do the stripped down storytelling, and so that
Mm.
you got this kind of much more immediate sort of edgy style that really appealed to young, pretentious, full of shit people like myself.
Well,
And
how did you get the scripts like every episode, or was it like week by week, or how what was
no,
like pre-production like?
well, that's a good question. I mean, like they some of they were definitely writing. The scripts were being written. There
Mm.
were being stuff worked on. Once we were, they were they for Royle Family. I was receiving the material as they were writing it before we actually got into the business of the rehearse record process
Mm.
of shooting the Royle Family, which I'll
Mm.
tell you about in a second.
Yeah.
But that was interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that they always worked with someone else as well, didn't they? I mean, like they had Henry,
In season one, yeah, in the first
yeah,
seasons.
and then I think Carmel came on in season
Well,
one, right?
I wanted to
She
ask
did
you
a
about
bit
her.
in season one,
She because
yeah,
she's credited in season two,
yeah,
and there's only like I can't I really want to speak to her. I've not really found anything out about her,
yeah.
but I think she's quoted as saying she only got about 6 lines in the final scripts of the episodes, but Craig and Caroline insisted on giving her full writing credit. So
Well, I think that I wonder why. I think that maybe it helped. The reason for that would be that I'm speculating, but I
yeah,
suspect that it might have actually, lit a few fires for them, in terms of where the scripts go. So
Right,
that
right, right.
maybe they ended up writing most of the dialogue, but she was very involved, and I think, and the same with Henry. I mean, I think
Mm,
Henry would have been obviously a very, very important ingredient in the initial creation of the writing.
of course.
Yeah, and
Mm.
so I mean, there was a one occasion when I read one of the scripts. I remember before we were in prep, and there was being written. I can't remember which one it was.
Mm.
I think it was the not it wasn't the birthday one. Yeah, I think it might have been the birthday, which is six, isn't it? Of
Yeah, it's
series
the
two,
end of the second
which
series.
is
Yeah,
actually one of my favorite episodes I
yeah.
made.
And Anthony's 18th. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
18th. Yeah, I really love that. And when Joe comes in and sings his song at the end,
Oh
it's
my, what an
absolutely,
ending! What an
I
ending!
mean, it's magnificent.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, I'm not sure we've got enough material for this show.
Mm.
And she says, "What do you mean? What do you mean?" It's just, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. 22 pages doesn't feel like we've got quite enough yet. I remember saying to this cashier, he says we haven't got enough material. I can I can hear her saying it as I'm saying it, and he goes, "What?" He says, "He what?" It almost just like the program. I'm probably just imagining that, but
Yeah,
when I look back and remember this, I always remember it like Dave on the sofa going, "You are?
yeah,
What do you
yeah,
mean? What do you mean?" Whether that's true or not is another matter. But
yeah.
I do remember her getting onto what was a Amstrad word processor,
Wow.
and she started going, okay, so rather reluctantly started bashing out some material. And then about an hour later, she says, "There you go. Have a look at that." And there's about 10 pages
Mm.
of and I'll tell you what, I read these and thought, my word, it was absolutely marvelous.
Yeah.
It was like it was just like we pretty much didn't change the thing. We just shot those. It just came out. She just plucked it out of,
Yeah.
out of mid. It was just incredible.
God.
So yeah, that was one of my script memories actually.
Mm.
And so, and as you notice in that particular episode, by then, when we were shooting, I'm scattering around this, but
No.
we would the focus that she would apply to the work. So don't get me wrong, it was great fun, but it was also very intense.
Mm.
It was a huge fun. They were huge fun to be with. She was like on it the whole time. We would shoot. We would when once after a day's shoot, we'd either look at some rushes that we hadn't seen in the morning because they hadn't come from the labs, or we'd talk about what's the day that's been, and to quote Kate Bush, and then we'd often dissect the show into the evening, and talk about programs after that, and then often it might be 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, and we'd be picked up at 5 in the morning, and then we'd be looking
Right.
at,
Right.
we'd be looking at dailies before we started shooting in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, and that went
Wow.
on for a couple of months, but and it was a genuine pleasure to do it as well, quite frankly, because it was all that, and it shows in the shows the detail.
Oh, yeah.
It's the detail in the
Perfect.
shows, and you see that in the first season. You see that in the first season. I was looking at it thinking, there's so many layered gags going on here,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like to me, when I learned at the feet of people like John Lloyd
Mm.
and Jeffrey Perkins, it's all about layers. The comedy
Yeah.
is about it's about multiple details. Lots of details that some audiences will only, many of us, when looking at these layers, they are consumed subtextually and subconsciously, as well as the actual stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that we need you to. That's why we need you to unpick it, so that you go. This is all this. There's all these other things that if you want to see them, as John would put it, if you want it, it's there.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily need it all to enjoy it.
Well,
But if you get, but if you're
yeah, yeah, yeah.
if you're a certain kind of person, and I suspect we're the similar. I just want it all when I'm watching, and I
Oh
want
yeah.
all of it. I want to feel all of those things, and that's what gets me excited about program making.
Well, there was one thing I spotted on my rewatch the other day that I've never noticed before, but I thought about it in the context of yourself. Because one of
Yeah,
the things that I have noticed about the Royal Family is that Craig and Caroline like to do sort of meta winky jokes to the audience sometimes. So you might have a scene where Darren and Anthony are doing a scene from the Fast Show.
they did the Fast Show, didn't
Yeah,
they?
and
In the
and
birthday
obviously
show,
Caroline and Craig were in the Fast Show.
they were in the Fast Show.
Well, but it's
Yeah,
like I don't think they would ever do a joke about Brookside on Royal Family
no,
because I feel like
they
that
never
would be
did do that.
no, but I
They
feel like
do the
that would be
Fast
too
Show
much. Yes, but they referenced Buzzcocks on your first episode that you directed
and Spitting Image.
and Spitting Image and
And
Spitting
Spitting Image
Image.
Sue
Yeah,
says I never really got that very
yeah,
much.
that's right.
I
That's
really
right.
like that. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
used to I love that about the show. You know,
yeah, me too. Me too.
because that's how we consume. That's the genius of the Royal Family to me was, you know, that in a way, when I look at the photography that really excites me, it's often photography people are looking at something.
Mm,
So the
yeah,
fact
yeah.
that you've got the focus is when they're having conversations and they don't have to look at each other when they're talking because they're actually watching something else. They might have a row,
Yeah.
but I mean, quite frankly, I don't. What are you talking about? No, I'm fine, thanks. Take your coat off, Dave. No, I'm all right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But they're looking at the television.
Yeah.
And you know, and to me, that makes it that is the key element of the show that makes it real.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's their absorption in something else and not in the dynamics of what you know. They're not going. Excuse me a minute. Sorry, what did you say? I want to have a chat with you about something. No, we're actually we've got other things we're interested in. You
Yeah.
know, Jim he's got his television. He doesn't want to be bothered. You know, he's watching you know the Antiques Roadshow. And what? Yeah, could get a tea. I mean, you know, it just feels to me like that's how people are.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That's how I am when I'm watching
Yeah. Oh yeah.
television. I mean, or you know, or rather, you know, I feel this is the world I grew up in. I mean, you know, this is my world. You know, being I have four brothers and a sister,
Mm,
and my mum. We didn't have a dad, but we had a mum.
mm.
But that's how we watched television. You know,
Yeah.
the television in the corner, there we all were. You know, yeah, that's what it was like.
I mean, we focused a lot on Craig and Caroline, but what about the rest of the cast? Like,
Oh
how are
my
your
god!
experiences
I
with them?
mean, listen. I mean, obviously, one's. I mean, I don't think Craig gets enough credit, quite frankly,
I agree. I
for
agree.
being the genius. The reactions that he gives, I can tell you that you know, there's never not a good one
No,
on any slate,
no, no,
right?
no.
Ever. And the same with Caroline. And I think her acting chops are completely underestimated. You know,
Agreed.
like you
Agreed.
go, it's just unbelievable, this stuff.
Yeah.
And the fact that, you know, she'd rather do this, what? Because you know why she wants to do that?
Mm,
So she can watch everybody else say things. So that, you
mm.
know, does she ever mention that in the past?
No,
But
no.
what she would do, she's the scripts are designed around the fact that she says as little as possible, so that she can watch everybody else say their lines.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you go, how smart is that
That
inside a
is,
film?
yeah. Wow.
That is like awesome. And you go and then you get to the cast. I mean,
Oh,
come on.
mm,
You know, like I mean, whether it's Doreen, Peter,
oh,
you know,
yeah.
I mean,
Jessica.
Jessica,
Mm,
I mean, young Ralph, and then of course, I mean Sue and Sue and Ricky.
yes.
My God,
Mm,
like Sue's looks,
yeah.
her millimetric ability to shift from delight to disappointment and sadness and dissatisfaction, all in the
Mm.
space of 3 milliseconds,
Yeah, yeah,
is
yeah, yeah, yeah.
incredible.
It is. It
Yeah,
is.
yeah, you know, so that she, you know, like that whole thing where, you know, when she's flushed and she's really irritated. She's very out of character, irritated, and she's still trying to be, Barbara.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
she's got other things on her mind. But of course, they come first,
Hmm.
and of course, I mean, Liz Smith.
Oh, the best. Yeah, my favorite. Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
Titan.
it's just incredible what
Yes.
she
Yeah.
does with these what she does, and of course they all. And I think it's mind blowing as a director to be able to work with a cast at this level.
Yes.
And you're not going to experience it very often in your life.
No.
And of course, the way that, and of course, what happens is, I believe their skill levels just go up
Mm.
collectively
Yes.
by
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
by being in the same space,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the way so you'll be in Ealing Studios, so you've got this tiny little sort of little set, within the shore set, and then we've got loads of space around it, and we're in this big studio, and then we've got some rehearsal rooms. We'd go through all of the moments in each scene in a room where we've got a few sofas and chairs where we're doing the read throughs, and we go through the moments where the focus of, say, Caroline might go that way or that way, or what Ralph is doing during the whole scene.
Mm.
And then this, all of these looks and stuff are rehearsed.
Right. Yeah.
They're not made up, and they're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
made up. I mean, they're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
made
Yeah.
up during the filming. They're actually, they're all worked out, and that so that pacing, of them together. But it was, I'm watching it again with a view to talking to you about it and
Mm.
thinking, God, what a pleasure it was for me to actually just. I was sort of reliving how slack jawed and amazement at times I was by, say, Liz Smith's performances,
Yeah.
and how she could just delight you. I mean, I've got nothing to do with it, and there's nothing. I'm just there, really steering the ship, going, "That's marvelous. Shall we carry on?" I mean, it's like having a really nice wind in the sails, and you're going, "My God, you're doing us all proud."
Right. Right.
It really was that much of a pleasure, and I have absolutely no credit for it whatsoever.
Well, it's
But
Sue Johnston in her book, which is a great book,
yeah,
Things I Haven't Told My Mother. She recalls in her book how close the cast were, and she speaks
yeah,
about series two,
yeah.
and she references you indirectly. She says the director, but she says the director would say cut, and we wouldn't get up off the sofas. We'd just chat as friends. Like, is that what you witness? Like,
Oh yeah, I mean there'd be like, yeah, I mean it would be. I mean I never ever said cut, by the way. No,
right?
I don't say cut. I
Okay.
say, I mean, I'm a terrible one for letting things go on.
Right, 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 right.
But because I'm always interested in seeing what happens afterwards, with the looks.
Yeah.
You never know.
Hmm.
But it was really like that. We would, as a group, we would just go out. I mean, like when we started prepping, I spent a lot of time with Caroline and Craig. When the cast, we'd often go out and post and then just hang out with each other,
Yeah, yeah.
and they would as well.
Mm, mm,
And I mean, for example, I would, when Caroline announced, I went back to her place a few times and we talked about the days that had been. And then when she started to talk about wanting to direct, I said, "Well, I go home to my partner and child were up north at the time where we were living, and I'm going home at weekends. So, I'd go 2 or 3 times a week. We spend the nights just talking about films and
mm.
how to, and just having lots of good-natured disagreements about it all. But you know, you look at what, say, that there's a moment in the series one where Peter Martin comes in, just says no for 5 minutes while
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
dress is being tried on,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I just think when I looked at that scene, I thought I just really want to do a scene like that where it's just a four shot, and
Mm.
there's no, it was so beautifully done.
Yes.
and that was a big inspiration. I was saying to Caroline when I was looking at the show, that was one of the standout scenes for me in the season, in the series, and also the three ladies, Liz,
Oh my
Doreen,
God.
and Sue, when they talk about marriage in the
She
other
knows
room,
nothing of pain. Yeah,
she
yeah,
knows nothing of pain.
yeah,
And when the moments they all say together in that particular scene
yeah.
about what it's like to have a very long marriage,
Yes, yeah.
it's just absolute
Oh, it's
genius.
amazing. And
It's just amazing moments those are, and they really struck. I thought to myself, of that's what I that's if I don't turn in moments like that, I will have failed.
well,
Yeah,
series two, like,
yeah,
because it's
yeah,
funny, Steve. Like one of the alongside reviewing these episodes, I do like quiz
yeah.
episodes where I'll have,
Yes, I saw that.
yeah, yeah. So I'll have like a fellow fan on, and I'll give them 10 questions on a series, and I'll ask them
Yeah,
generic questions at the end, favorite character, favorite series,
yeah,
etc.
yeah.
Two always comes up. Like, I think two is widely accepted as the best series. I don't know whether it's the backbone of Denise being pregnant. I don't know whether it's just everyone
Yeah.
getting their footing. But, when you tot it up, when you think about the pregnancy episode at the start, my personal favorite episode, Barbara's Had Enough, the millionaire episode. Like,
The
it's,
millionaire, the
oh, it's
millionaire
gold.
row,
Yeah,
the row during the millionaire, where the camera, to me, was one of the most exciting shooting parts because the camera just goes flips, it goes
yeah,
back, and you because it sort of basically it's virtually an entire millionaire episode, right?
pretty
And
much.
so, but it's just basically one long row.
Yeah,
Big chunks of it are a row,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
because I mean they love a TV conversation that they can
Well,
that's
do you have any insight into that? Because I've always wondered, did Craig and Caroline and Carmel find a millionaire episode and like write the script around it, or because it is a real episode, so it's like it's just so impressive.
yeah, yeah. Well, this is they did have the episode.
Mm.
It wasn't just like any old episode.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I can't quite remember. I remember asking that same question
Mm,
at the
mm.
time because but in a way it became once once the dynamics between Ricky and Caroline and Ricky had some of their great moments in that
They did, yeah,
in that particular scene
yeah, yeah, yeah.
together and where
Horse's
you
ass, and yeah, yeah,
it's just absolutely fantastic.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's great to see Ricky really on the back foot,
Yeah.
like
Oh, yeah.
and we see actually probably more like the actual Carolina Hearn that actually is the sharp, razor sharp person that she is.
Yeah, she has a go
It
at her dad in it. Yeah, she
Yeah,
does. Yeah.
she really does. No, that is a really great episode, and I watched it the other day and thought, yeah, I remember remember how exciting it was to shoot it.
Yeah.
Also, at the time, now we have words like meta that is used every fucking 5 minutes,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
or,
yeah, yeah.
or they'll go, they might, if Caroline was around today, they'll go, how did you manifest this? You know,
Yeah.
and
The
you go, well,
intertextuality of the
yeah, the
like, yeah.
subtextual kind of narratives that you've developed over the course of the series. Is you what? And et cetera, and
Yeah.
and more power to anybody's elbow that wants to do that. But in
Yeah.
reality, I think it's this incredible, deep, sort of bottomless pit of television culture that the show is from.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
from this joy, and it held the country together for a
Mm.
few decades. That it was the big cultural event of our lives was
Yeah.
what was on the television,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that's there's very few shows that I don't think anybody loves television as much as Caroline did.
Right, right,
It's
right.
like and in all its forms. It's like I remember once listening to Jarvis Cocker talk about the sort of bric-a-brac of British pop culture, or so say, going into an old lady's house and it's full of glass fishes on the detail, the sort of micro
Mm,
ephemera
mm.
detail, and so and then and how he put it very correctly, that people who cock a snook at that kind of pop cultural interest,
Mm.
we don't want to waste our time with those people. If people get a pleasure out of a glass fish being on the side next to a teddy bear that's ceramic,
Yep.
that's got a big ruff and a clown costume, good on you.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
We have that, and
Yes.
you look at the room. You look at the room of the Royal Family. It's so lovingly dressed.
Oh, indeed. Yeah.
It's so lovingly. That is like anybody's home. I mean, like doing the gravy for the roast dinner scene, and how that kitchen is. That's my mum on a Sunday trying to feed 6 kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then do 10 other jobs while she's doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think Caroline and Craig have an innate understanding of that.
Mm. Mm.
And I mean, Sue is like this warrior woman. She's like this warrior titan
Yes, definitely.
that higher that is just unrelenting, and yet that has this incredible subtlety to the performances. And I think, for example, when Jess gets her moments, like when there's that moment in this first series, the polo,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
with the polo, and of course we do it. We do a they reprise that with the, of course, with all the penguins, with the club biscuits.
Yes. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
we we that's reprised when we go into the commercial songs
Yes. Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
second series.
Yeah.
But there's definitely the germs, the seeds were sown with the polo scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, well, let's do that. Let's do that again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's one of my favorites. Nimble.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Real
yeah.
bread. Real bread. Yeah. Yeah. No, that was. I just
Real
want
bread
to
half the weight or something. Yeah,
a butt lighter.
but real
Real
bread but lighter.
real
Yeah.
bread, but lighter. Yeah. And I only know that from the Royal Family. Like, that is before my time, but
Yeah,
I
because I
will.
know that
Yeah. Of
song really
course.
well.
Of
Actually, when we
course.
did that scene, we had this head of props called Stuart, who introduced himself, by the way, when he came on the show. He goes, "Hello, I'm Stuart. I'm your head of props. I'm the most expensive, but I'm not the best." And I go, "Okay, thanks, Stuart." Instantly liked him, So,
Yeah.
and anyway, when they were doing the song, "We Fly Like a Bird
Yeah.
in the
Yeah. Oh,
Sky,"
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
from the ceiling in comes a loaf of nimble on a fishing line that you
No.
don't see in the outtakes.
Wow.
It just comes in as a
Wow.
little prank, and it was very, very funny.
Well, you're
Yeah,
you're you're pointing towards something that I'm really interested again with the show. Obviously, I'm obsessed with the Royal Family.
yeah.
When I look at the credits and I see all these people credited, I'm like, okay, what did they do? And someone that Liz Smith mentions in her book actually was Tony Cranston, the editor. He won
Tony
a BAFTA for the
Cranston.
show.
Yeah, well, Tony and I worked a lot together, and I got to work with him um, on the. I was about to say, you see, we talked about what a joy it is to work with this incredible cast.
Mm,
Obviously, nothing happens without any writing.
yeah,
However,
yeah,
but then you look at these performances and you go, "Oh my word!" And
mm,
then you go to the camera work,
yeah,
and you go to these guys that worked at Granada. They were the end of the staffers of these big TV
right,
production broadcasters.
yeah,
So they
yeah,
did World in Action. They had news stories. So
right,
they
right, right,
needed
right.
film cameramen. They did dramas. They did Sherlock Holmes. They did all these things, and they were in-house people.
Mm,
And then you had editors like Tony Cranston, who did World in Action,
oh
who
wow,
did news stories, and did all
mm,
he did also. You look at the choices in the editing of
mm,
this show, the choices, the
exquisite,
the pace, the pace of the choices, and I
agreed.
always think I don't like to tell, you know. I'm not a person that gives an editor a bunch of notes, goes use this, and this. I want to see what they think.
Mm, okay,
I want to see
yeah,
what they think, because often in my stuff, a pro editor will give you the last take in an assembly every time,
okay,
because that's a logical thing to do when you're putting together roughly
yeah,
what the show is. Well, in my takes, I know that there's going to be a bit in the previous take and possibly the one before that.
Yeah, yeah,
And the
yeah.
question is whether you know what those bits are. So I never worry about it being always the last take, because generally pro editors do that. But what I'm interested in is the people that decide to go, no, I'm going to have Sue out of focus and I'm going to have the person in front sharp. But four of those lines will be said in the background, but she's not
Mm.
sharp because we're watching someone else watching the television listen to it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that to
Mm-hmm.
me makes the show special
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when you're not always on the person, right?
Oh God, yeah. Oh God, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and Tony, as he worked with a lot of really good cameramen, and a lot of really good directors. He was already a very distinguished editor by the time he did the Royle Family,
Yeah,
and
see,
so
so assured.
yeah, and so that assuredness. But most of all, as John Lloyd said to me when I first started, look, Steve, what you have to remember is it's all about taste.
Mm.
Now we oftenly call it tone. But I mean, tonality or its tone, and it's
Yeah.
true. It is about taste, and if you've got the ability to make the right choices, you're going to have a good career if you get the right
Mm.
material to work with. Not everybody makes the right choices.
Mm.
Tony Cranston makes the right choices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You,
It's
you and you go, and whether you agree with him or not, I might not always agree with him. Sometimes I'll go, well, I'd quite like that take. No,
yeah.
no, no. It already works really well. Some of the adjustments we make in a conversation, like with me, Craig, and Caroline in Edit Suite with Tony, you start shaping things slightly differently. But Tony's work is just incredible
Mm.
in
Mm.
the Royle Family.
Well, yeah, it's just, I've read a lot of biographies of a lot of actors and actresses, and they never ever say the editing was amazing and they name the editor. So the fact that Liz Smith did that, I was like, that
Yeah,
is,
we see this.
you know,
This just tells you everything about Liz Smith. What?
yes.
Well, look who she's worked with in her career.
Oh my God. I mean, Hard
I mean,
Labor with Mike Lee. My God.
I mean, for
Like,
God's sake, I mean, she's the
yeah.
people she's worked with in her career. I
Yeah.
mean, and me as a sort of fanboy nerd
Yeah.
getting to work with her,
Yeah. I know.
I was slightly overwhelmed. It's like, I mean, this is Liz Smith in the same room. I'm in
Yeah.
this. She's in my show.
Yeah.
Yeah, or rather, I'm lucky enough to work with her. It's the other way around, of course. It's not. Do you know what I
Just,
mean? That's how
just,
it
just
feels.
someone else that I want to mention as well. I don't know if you remember working with her, but she seems to be quite an established costume designer. Annie Hardinge, is that her
Yeah,
name?
I work with Annie. I work with a lot with Annie over many
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
Yeah,
So, because I
I
mean, the
mean, so
costume of the
she's
Royal Family is such a thing, right?
it's
Like,
incredible, and Annie
yeah,
is an artist. I mean,
yeah.
she's like, I've worked with Annie on many other shows too, and
Mm,
so and I think when I worked with Annie on the Royal Family, it might have been one of the first times I ever had. After that, we our paths would cross quite regularly,
mm.
but again, you see, it's much like the set dressing or the sort of fraying cushions on the couch. If
Yes,
that the
yeah,
choices that say what they're wearing,
mm.
it's just so bang on, isn't it?
Yeah. It is incredible.
And like when Emma comes in the door,
Yeah,
when you meet her for the first time, and that, and of course that season, Ralph has got his hair,
he
you know,
does. He does. Yeah,
or that
yeah.
particular episode, it's all
Oh, so
changed.
the blonde bleach.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And you see that all the time. And of course, Darren, his mate,
Oh
with
God,
that sort of soccer
legend.
hooligan
Yeah.
sort of hair, all those wonderful choices that that are made by these amazing people like Annie, our makeup people,
Yeah, yeah.
and
It's
it's one of the most fascinating parts of actually making something like this is how many great people you need to actually deliver a sort of fabric that gives you, something that the camera is going to be looking at, and with all these little significations that tell you everything about the characters.
it's
Whether
yeah, yeah. So sorry, but it's just like what you say about costume as well. Something that I've just remembered is when we first meet Emma, when we first meet Sheridan Smith, you actually see that she's got a tribal tat around her belly button. And I was wondering if that was a real thing, but I looked at pictures of Sheridan Smith and it's not. They just put that in for the character, which is quite intriguing.
yeah, See, I hadn't even spotted that at all.
No,
I will
yeah,
go back and have a look.
yeah. Have a look at her belly button. Yeah,
Yeah,
uh, but I
but don't
mean,
you? Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I was going to say when I first met Sheridan, she came
mm,
in. And she was playing a young Saxon girl, right?
yes, yeah,
And so we did read the scene. I thought this is so perfect. It's not true. So I asked her to do it in a completely different way.
yeah,
It was just like instant, and of course it was also that she couldn't quite be asked to do it as well. I love the fact that she wasn't that bothered. And I thought this is one of the most talented young ladies I've ever met. She
yes.
just had this incredible intelligence, and you know, like every moment in that she's in that when she appears as Emma, she's it's perfection, isn't it?
Yes, yes, she's brilliant performance. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I saw her on the West End recently.
yeah.
Opening night. She was terrific in that.
What you saw the opening night of the new show?
I don't know, as in it's called opening night.
Yes, I know it is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Sorry, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, no, yeah,
yeah,
no, I wasn't there. Yeah, I saw it, and
yeah. And was she good?
she was terrific. Yeah, it was an odd concept, a sort of musical
Yeah,
adaptation of the John Cassavetes classic, but
yeah. I
she's
know.
very good. Yeah, she's very good. But
Well, you know, she comes from her family are all show band
right,
singers.
right, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
she's a good. She's a very decent guitarist.
Oh, is that
You
right?
know,
Oh,
I
that's
mean,
cool.
she can bash out a country and western tune like no one can. You know,
Mm.
they were all her parents were entertainers. You know,
Ah, okay.
that had a little band, and she's oh my god,
I
what a
realize we haven't spoken too much about Ricky. Do you have any Ricky stories you want to share?
many stories. I mean, I mean, I just well, I mean, I love the fact that the whole show that she for years wanted to do a show with Sue and Ricky,
Mm.
you know, and then I mean, look, I mean, my all my family are from my mum's family. She's like the youngest of like, so there's you know she's got five brothers and five sisters, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
in Cheshire. So that is that part of the world. And my mum's mum, I always used to think she was like Bill Shankly, you know, sort of like she was like a they had that sort of Ricky's from that sort of world,
Yeah.
and and I think that he really enjoyed playing up. I mean, they got him to get the banjo out on a few occasions,
Yeah, they did.
and you know he has that very much that Brookie persona
Hmm.
that and the you know the sort of patriarch, the sort of hypocritical patriarch type character.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that he absolutely sort of adored Caroline. You know, it's sort of like
Mm.
he would just walk through walls for her,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and the sort of the chemistry between Sue and Ricky was was magnificent, really.
Mm. It was. I mean,
And so but I think that so in a way we didn't I mean we really I mean I got on well with Ricky. I enjoyed him. We and often if we sometimes we'd go out and Ricky would come up and join us. He'd turn up with a cat with a six pack
right.
of a beer that he likes, so we didn't have to
Sainsbury's
put.
mild, I think he enjoyed.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
he'd turn up with his packets if we were if we were at something that, a little bit more sort of like you know like we tended to go to some nice places, and Ricky would
Right.
join us with this lovely Sainsbury bag of beer, which I used to love,
Yeah.
and we talk a lot about all sorts of things. One of my favorite stories of Ricky is not really Ricky, but we did this long. One of the scenes was like 10 pages long. What it wasn't it wasn't the millionaire scene.
Mm.
But anyway, so we shot this scene, and Tony cuts it, and we have a look at that, and then we fine cut that scene with me, Caroline, and Craig in the room, and Chrissy, my lovely PA, script
Mm.
supervisor, and we put it in we put it into the final master. And and then about a week later, it says we no, maybe not a week, but maybe 5 days later. Yeah, have a look at that scene again and see if there's anything that you spot that's wrong.
Mm.
So I looked at it, I actually thought it's pretty good. What's wrong with it?
Yeah.
Ricky wasn't wearing his glasses.
Ah.
I mean, that's like an entire day's filming, right? But the thing is, not only that, we filmed it for an entire day. We cut it. We see it like 10 times, 15 times in
Oh,
an edit
yeah.
suite.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Christy rings me up and says, it's got no glass. But I mean, it just did not spot it.
Yeah.
And we none of us spotted it, nor did Tony. I mean, like none of us, like, we just didn't. We just cut the scene, and isn't that amazing that things like that
It's
can happen?
wild. That's what, and
Yeah,
I don't know if you've heard this, but the new sofa, which is the Christmas special, the 2008 Christmas special,
yeah,
or is it the gold? No, excuse me, sorry, it's the Golden Egg Cup.
right,
Um, they recorded the opening 10, 15 minutes in the house before they leave in the caravan, and they got it back in the edit suite, and there was a hair on the lens, and they had to go back and do the whole thing again.
yeah.
Like I mean,
There
you
you
must
go.
have some war stories about that, right? That must
Oh my
be a
God.
bugger.
I mean, I remember doing. Listen, I mean, I when I was an art director, I did a promo for Genesis called Land of Confusion, which is all puppets,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And it has I was in the Oxford Scientific Films with 300 snakes in these big trenches, and we had these periscope cameras that could whiz in and out. This is before the advent of speed drones,
Mm,
mini speed drones. We had this camera on a giant crane with a tiny little snorkel going in amongst this sort of what looked like a swamp covered in heads and we brought in insects and flies
yeah, yeah.
and these giant fucking great big snakes. So we
Mm,
film it for an entire weekend,
mm.
virtually there for 48 hours. And we get the Russians back on Monday, and a fly had shat on one of the mirrors.
Oh, oh
Yeah, and
God.
so thousands of pounds were spent
Oh,
removing this thing. In those days, if you wanted to do paint out type, tracking type, paint
mm,
out type jobs,
yeah,
this was like the very, very beginnings of that stuff. So it cost fortunes to do that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's one example.
it's insane. I just want to close on the Royal Family chat with the Christmas special, the
Yes,
the inaugural Christmas special, as you were. One of the most iconic moments, in the history of the show, really, when you have Jim and Caroline
in the bathroom,
in the bathroom. Yeah. Did you ever notice, by the way, that you can see the
someone
camera?
was seen.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
I spotted that, and I mentioned it on the podcast, and like I googled around, and it didn't seem to have been picked up by people. But I mean, it
no.
doesn't detract from what is one of the most moving scenes in the history of television. Like.
Well, oh, that's the really lovely thing to say. It was very moving at the time, and at
Mm,
that time, we were taught. We did. I think it by then we'd done, those very long takes in the birthdays episode
yeah,
where we'd done long developing takes.
yeah.
Because I was talking I was talking to Caroline about the master shots in film and what they mean and how they're done and when we did the first rehearsal for the scene, I said, Caroline, I think we should the Caroline that we're just going to develop the scene gently towards you as a very and then to an intimate two shot, and then we're going to imperceptibly sort of get the shot looser
Mm,
during the back end of the scene, and
mm,
that's all we're going to do.
mm,
And she was well into doing it that way. So there obviously it's all one shot,
yeah,
and but her performance, I think,
yeah.
of someone, when a performance like that feels to me like we can speculate, but she didn't have her own child,
No.
and I often wondered whether, but the amount of empathy and insight and perception of what it would be to be soon to be a mum,
Mm,
and the fear factor that having been in that situation where just prior to birth, these are very real moments
Yes.
that occur in everybody's lives, and I think I know you talk about it in your episode and
Mm.
when you're talking about it, it was I was very touched by the story of Ricky and how he felt about that scene that you described so eloquently in it,
Yeah.
yeah, when I was it has that's how it felt at the time, exactly as you describe it in your previous podcast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was that moving, and it was that good, and it was pretty amazing to watch it as well.
I bet. I bet.
Because it's one take. There's only
Yes.
one take of that.
Yes. Yes. You didn't reshoot it, right? You just
No,
that was it. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
it.
God.
And I think that's one of the highlights of the entire experience of working with Caroline, I would say.
Mm. 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 And I mean, needless to say, 52, right? Gone far too soon. What a genius.
Well, it's just that sort of that I often, on occasion, got the strong impression that she didn't really rate herself very highly,
Mm.
in a quite powerful way. And I remember saying, I won't go into the context of that, but I had to sort of sit her down and say, listen, you've got more talent in your fingernails than most people sweat, and
Yeah.
I genuinely, I meant it. I didn't say it vehemently, but I said it very. She had a big impact on me as a director. Um, she had a big impact upon me as a person. Her kindness, her consideration, her empowerment of others to do really, really well
Mm.
around her. Her
Mm.
desire for people to be recognized, to be praised when they deserve it, and to you know to be accountable when they're not is a sign of a really good leader, and that's who she was in my experience of her, and she was a good and a good kind friend too,
Indeed. Indeed. And a great director as well. I mean, she took your
and a
job for
terrific
series three,
director.
but it's
Well, you see, well, why wouldn't she? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah,
why wouldn't
indeed.
she direct it? And she's a very very fine director, and to me, it was to actually even to be asked to give her advice about it was a pleasure.
Indeed, indeed. Steve, any final stories you want to share? Anything Royal Family based you maybe might struck upon?
Um, I don't know whether I don't even know what I've said to you is any use to you really. I mean,
It's been fascinating the entire time. I can promise you that.
okay. Well, look, I mean, I will listen to more of the episodes because I just really enjoy the fact that the way you dissect the work, and this is why I'm here because I just think that to see someone provide a lot of contextual
Mm,
information that is actually all there and inside the show for those that aren't of the age where they'll know what Play School was
yes, yeah.
or
Or Larry Grayson was something I had
or
to look
who
up.
Larry
You
Grayson is
know, yeah,
or those
yeah.
people on so I mean what happens when you get older, someone says, well, you worked on what's League of Gentlemen, and you go, yeah, yeah, well, it was a show I made, and so that's what happens. That's what happens. But yeah, so look, more power to your elbow, and it's been a pleasure talking to you.
No, Steve, it's been fantastic. I mean, the final thing we've got a movie coming down the pipeline, right? Heavenly Waters is approaching. Is that
Well,
right?
we'll see. We'll see. I mean, it's a lovely script. It's well, we don't. I mean, been close to having the cast that we want, and then it evaporates, and then
And
we
we should
carry
say it's
on.
like about. Sorry, I read it yesterday. It's like about a rock band reuniting. Is that
Yeah.
right? Going to Greece?
After yeah, they go to Greece to they to it's a like a memorial. It's a last wishes of the deceased wife of the former lead singer that the band reform.
Mm.
Um, and that's sort of at the heart of the idea. But of course, all the enmities and disagreements and
Yes, yeah,
of
yeah.
what you got someone 5 decades down the line or 4 decades down the line from when they were 22 to when they're you know 68 or
It's amazing.
70, and so
Right, right.
and all of that means and it has that potential, and some of it's it's if we get it right, it could be a really great and very entertaining film. We'll
Right.
see.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing.
Well, my pleasure. It's been a pleasure to have a chat with you.